Every crime is a wound on the world. We're here to dissect it, layer by layer, to find the truth buried within. This is Anatomy of Crime. The sound is the first thing you would notice. A high, ever-present hum. Not the singular note of a single machine, but a chorus of thousands. It is the sound of a nation's ambition, the collective vibration of countless precision instruments, spinning at speeds that defy the imagination. We are deep underground, beneath the sands of the Iranian desert, in a sprawling, windowless complex of reinforced concrete. This is the Natanz fuel enrichment plant, one of the most secret and heavily guarded facilities on Earth. Here, cascades of centrifuges, tall, slender cylinders of high-strength steel, perform a delicate, violent dance. They spin uranium hexafluoride gas at supersonic speeds, separating the infinitesimally heavier uranium-238 from the much rarer fissile uranium-235. It is a process of immense technical difficulty, the critical step in creating fuel for a nuclear reactor or for a nuclear bomb. To the outside world, particularly in Washington and Tel Aviv, this hum is the soundtrack to a slow-motion nightmare. It is the sound of a red line being approached, of a geopolitical crisis reaching its boiling point. For years, diplomacy has failed, sanctions have been levied, and covert actions have been rumored, all to silence this sound. But the hum only grows louder, more defiant. Inside the facility, however, the sound is one of immense national pride. It represents Iran's mastery of the nuclear fuel cycle, a scientific achievement they believe is their sovereign right. It is a symbol of their resilience against foreign pressure, a testament to their ingenuity. To protect this crown jewel, the Iranians have created a fortress. The facility is ringed with anti-aircraft guns. Its most sensitive halls are buried 75 feet underground to protect them from bunker-busting bombs. But its most sophisticated defense is invisible. The industrial control network that manages the thousands of centrifuges is air-gapped. It is a digital island, completely disconnected from the global internet. No emails, no web browsing, no remote access. It is sealed, theoretically impenetrable to any outside digital threat. The engineers and physicists who walk these halls believe their systems are safe. They monitor their consoles, watching the data streams that report the health and performance of their machines. The numbers are steady. The pressures are normal. The rotational frequencies are exactly where they should be. Everything, according to the screens, is fine. But something is wrong. The hum is changing. It is subtle at first, a discordant note in the symphony, a slight waver in the pitch that an untrained ear would miss. But the engineers notice, and then the failures begin. One after another, centrifuges begin to wobble, to vibrate uncontrollably, and then to tear themselves apart with catastrophic force. Hundreds of them. Maintenance crews are overwhelmed, swapping out damaged units, but the replacements fail just as quickly. There is talk of faulty parts, of poor workmanship, of foreign sabotage in the supply chain. Panic and paranoia begin to seep through the concrete walls. The scientists are hunting for a saboteur, for a human agent, for a physical flaw in their materials. They are looking for a ghost they can see. They are looking in the wrong place. The saboteur is already inside. It is not a person. It is a weapon, an entity made of pure information, a ghost in their machines. It lives in the very systems they are using to monitor the chaos, and it is telling them a comforting lie while it systematically destroys their life's work from within. This weapon has a name that will become synonymous with a new era of conflict, Stuxnet. Today, we are not dissecting the actions of a lone killer or a criminal syndicate. We are dissecting a crime of a different order of magnitude, a geopolitical act of sabotage that blurred the line between code and physical reality forever. We will explore the anatomy of a cyberweapon, the world's first. We will trace the path of this digital ghost from its mysterious creation in the world's most advanced intelligence agencies, across the air-gapped defenses of Natanz, and into the very heart of the machines it was designed to obliterate. This is the story of how a few hundred kilobytes of code changed the nature of warfare itself. Our story begins not in the deserts of Iran or the clandestine labs of a superpower, but in an office in Minsk, Belarus, in June of 2010. A cybersecurity analyst named Sergey Ulysin, working for a small firm called Virus Blockade, receives a call from a client in Iran. The client's company is a technology services provider, and they are utterly stumped. Several of their customers' computers are caught in an endless loop of crashing and rebooting. They are experiencing the dreaded blue screen of death, a generic but maddening Windows error. Ulysin assumes it's a common malware infection or a faulty driver, a routine problem he's solved 1,000 times before. He is a professional, but this is, for him, just another Tuesday. He asks the client to send him a disk image, a complete digital snapshot of one of the malfunctioning computers, and he begins his analysis. Almost immediately, Ulysin knows this is something different. The file he's examining is enormous by malware standards. About 0.5 megabyte, or 500 kilobytes. Most viruses are lean and efficient, designed to be small and stealthy. This was bloated, complex, a behemoth. As he digs deeper, he finds something that makes his blood run cold. A kernel mode driver file with a valid digital signature. In the world of software, a digital signature is a stamp of authenticity, a cryptographic guarantee from a trusted company that a piece of code is legitimate and unaltered. Malware with a valid signature is exceedingly rare and incredibly dangerous. The operating system is built on a hierarchy of trust. A signed driver is given a key to the kingdom. It can operate at the very core or kernel of the system with the highest possible privileges. This driver was signed by Realtek Semiconductor, a massive and reputable Taiwanese hardware manufacturer. It was as if a wanted criminal was walking around with a perfect government-issued passport that gave him access to the most secure buildings in the country. This wasn't the work of a common cybercriminal. This was professional. This was state-sponsored. Ulysin and his team work tirelessly, using tools like IDA Pro, a disassembler that translates raw machine code into a more human-readable assembly language. It is a painstaking process, like trying to reconstruct a novel by looking at its individual letters. They find that this malware is a worm, meaning it is designed to self-replicate and spread from one computer to another. But its method of propagation is unlike anything they have ever seen. It uses not one, but 4 separate zero-day exploits. A zero-day exploit is the holy grail for a hacker. It's a secret vulnerability in a piece of software, unknown to the software's creators and to antivirus companies. Because it is unknown, there is no defense against it, no patch to fix it. Finding a single zero-day can take months or years of effort and can be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars on the black market. This worm was using 4 of them simultaneously. It was like a burglar who, instead of picking one lock, had 4 unique, uncopyable master keys to 4 different doors of the same house. One of the exploits was particularly insidious, a vulnerability in how Windows handled shortcut icons, known as LNK files. It meant that the worm could spread to a USB flash drive, and the moment someone simply viewed the contents of that drive in Windows Explorer, without clicking on anything, without running any program, their computer would be instantly infected. The very act of looking at the drive's contents was the trigger. It was a masterpiece of offensive engineering, designed specifically to jump the air gap via the sneaker net, the informal network created by people carrying data on physical media. But the true mystery of the worm was its purpose. It was spreading, yes, but it seemed to be doing nothing. On most infected computers, it would install itself, check the system, and then go dormant. It wasn't stealing bank account information. It wasn't encrypting files for ransom. It wasn't creating a botnet to send spam. It was a weapon of incredible sophistication with no apparent mission. It was a gun with a hair trigger, but it wasn't firing. Ulason's team realizes they have stumbled upon something far beyond their usual scope. They write up their findings and alert the wider cybersecurity community. Soon, global giants like Symantec and Kaspersky Lab have their best researchers on the case. They give the worm a name, a portmanteau derived from file names they found in the code, like !stub and !mrxnet.size Stuxnet, and as they begin to peel back its layers, they uncover a mission so specific, so audacious that it sounds like science fiction. The researchers at Symantec, led by a team including Liam Omerchu and Eric Chian, dedicate immense resources to cracking Stuxnet. They set up isolated lab environments to watch the worm in action, tracing its every command. They discover another zero-day exploit it uses for spreading across local networks, this one involving the Windows print spooler. An infected machine could simply send a malicious print job to another computer on the network, and that machine would be compromised, again with no user interaction required. The worm was a master of silent, lateral movement. But still, the question remained, what was it looking for? The breakthrough comes when they analyze a specific part of the code, a component that only activates under a very particular set of circumstances. This code was looking for a specific software suite, Siemens Step 7. This was the clue that changed everything. Step 7 is not software you would find on a home computer or a typical office desktop. It is a specialized industrial software suite used to program and manage programmable logic controllers, or PLCs. A PLC is a small, ruggedized computer that acts as the brain for industrial machinery. They run everything from roller coasters and car assembly lines to power grids and water treatment plants. They are the unseen nerve centers of the modern industrial world. Stuxnet's focus on Siemens PLCs meant its target wasn't financial data or personal information. Its target was industrial infrastructure. But the targeting was even more specific than that. The worm wasn't interested in just any network running Siemens software. It had a checklist. After finding Step 7, it would then check for a specific model of PLC, the Siemens S7300 and S7400 series. If it found that, it would then perform a deeper network reconnaissance, looking for specific frequency converter drives, devices that control the speed of electric motors. The worm's code was specifically hunting for drives made by two companies, Vakon, based in Finland, and Ferraro Paya, based in Iran. This was the needle in the haystack, the combination of these specific hardware components. A particular Siemens PLC controlling a particular Vakon or Ferraro Paya drive was exceptionally rare. Researchers at Symantec ran a global search through industrial control system schematics and could find this precise configuration in only one place on Earth, Iran's nuclear facilities. The Ghost finally had a target. It was programmed to ignore millions of computers around the world, to lie dormant, to do no harm, until it found itself inside the control network of the Natanz uranium enrichment plant. Only then would it unleash its second stage, the payload. To grasp the audacity of this attack, one must first grasp the history and significance of its target. Iran's nuclear program did not begin with the Islamic Republic. It was initiated in the 1950s under Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, with significant help from the United States as part of the Atoms for Peace program. The 1979 revolution brought the program to a halt, but it was secretly revived in the 1980s during the Iran-Iraq War. For years, it operated in the shadows, until 2002, when an Iranian dissident group exposed the existence of two undeclared sites, a heavy water facility at Iraq and a vast underground uranium enrichment plant at Natanz. This revelation triggered an international crisis that would define the next decade of geopolitics. The central fear was that Iran was using its civilian nuclear program as a cover to develop nuclear weapons. At the heart of this fear was Natanz and its centrifuges, the specific model used by Iran. The P1, or IR-1, was a notoriously difficult machine to operate. Based on a 1970s European design stolen and proliferated by the Pakistani scientist A.Q. Khan, the IR-1 is a delicate instrument. Its rotor, made of high-strength aluminum, has to spin in a near-perfect vacuum at over 60,000 revolutions per minute. Any slight imbalance, any minute fluctuation in speed, can cause the machine to violently destroy itself. Iran struggled for years to master this technology, facing international sanctions that made it incredibly difficult to procure the necessary specialized materials, like more-aging steel and high-strength magnets. By 2009, however, they were making significant progress, with thousands of IR-1s spinning in long cascades, steadily increasing their stockpile of low-enriched uranium. This progress is what made Natanz a priority target. Stuxnet's payload was a masterpiece of industrial sabotage, a digital weapon perfectly tailored to exploit the physical frailties of its target. After years of analysis by the world's top cybersecurity experts, most notably the German researcher Ralph Langner of Langner Communications, the full attack sequence was finally reconstructed. It was a three-phase operation of sabotage and deception that Langner described as a dual-warhead weapon. Once Stuxnet confirmed it was on the right network and in control of the right PLCs, it would first enter a reconnaissance phase. For 13 days, it would silently record the normal operating parameters of the centrifuges. It was building a baseline of what normal looked like, specifically the rotational frequencies of the motors. This recorded data, a 21-second snippet of healthy operations, was the key to its deception. Then the attack would begin. The first warhead was subtle and slow. It targeted the valves controlling the flow of uranium hexafluoride gas into and out of the centrifuges, subtly manipulating pressures to damage the machines and reduce the efficiency of the enrichment process. This was a long-term attritional attack. But the second warhead was far more direct and violent. Stuxnet would intermittently take control of the frequency converters. It would issue a new command instructing the centrifuge motors to increase their speed from their normal operating frequency of around 1064 Hz up to 1410 Hz, a 33% increase. This was a significant jump, pushing the rotors to a speed far beyond their safe operational limits into a zone of high resonance. It would hold them at this dangerously high speed for 15 minutes. Then, after a period of dormancy, it would launch a different attack. It would command the motors to slow dramatically, down to just 2 Hz, for a full 50 minutes before returning to normal. These attacks were sporadic, occurring only every 27 days. This pacing was deliberate. It was designed to inflict maximum stress on the centrifuges, while making the cause impossible to diagnose. The extreme fluctuations in speed would create immense physical pressure and harmonic vibrations. Imagine a spinning top. As it spins faster, it becomes more stable. But if you push it past its ideal speed, it starts to wobble. For the centrifuges, this wobble was catastrophic, causing the finely balanced aluminum rotors to deform, strike their casings, and shatter. This was physical destruction, triggered by digital commands. This sabotage was only half of the worm's brilliance. The other half was its psychological warfare component. Stuxnet's true genius lay in its ability to hide its own attack. To do this, it deployed a rootkit directly onto the Siemens PLCs. A rootkit is a type of malware designed to hide its presence and its actions from administrators. Stuxnet's rootkit was a marvel of engineering. It infected the firmware of the PLC itself, the low-level code that allows the hardware to function. It placed itself between the PLC's legitimate code and the physical machinery it controlled. While Stuxnet was carrying out this sabotage, it was simultaneously performing an ingenious deception. It used the 21-second snippet of normal data it had recorded during its reconnaissance phase. As the centrifuges were being spun out of control, the operators at their Siemens consoles saw nothing amiss. The Stuxnet rootkit would intercept the real-time data coming back from the centrifuges, data that would have shown dangerously high frequencies, and instead would play back the loop of normal, healthy data. The screens in front of them displayed a steady frequency of 1064 Hz, even as the machines were screaming at 1410 Hz. Stuxnet had become a digital man-in-the-middle, not on a computer network, but between the control software and the physical world itself. The Iranian engineers were trapped in a technological nightmare. They could hear their machines failing. They could see the wreckage being carried out of the halls. But their diagnostic systems, the very tools meant to identify such problems, told them everything was perfect. This created an environment of complete confusion. Was it human error? Were the engineers incompetent? Was the raw material contaminated? Were the centrifuge parts, many of them procured through clandestine international channels to bypass sanctions, of inferior quality? The blame was cast everywhere except on the true culprit, because the true culprit was inconceivable. No one suspected that the code in their control systems had been turned into a weapon, that their own monitoring software was actively lying to them. It was the perfect crime. A silent, invisible saboteur that not only destroyed its target but also systematically erased its own tracks and sowed discord and mistrust among its victims. The question, of course, was, who could build such a thing? The complexity, the cost, and the sheer audacity of Stuxnet pointed to only one type of perpetrator, a nation-state, and likely more than one, working in concert. The resources required were immense. The development would have necessitated a team of elite programmers, access to intelligence about the specific hardware configuration inside Natanz, and, most tellingly, the acquisition of those 4 zero-day exploits, to say nothing of the 2 stolen digital certificates from Realtek and J-Micron. another feat requiring significant hacking prowess. This was not the work of activists or criminals. This was a military-grade operation. While no government has ever officially claimed responsibility, a mountain of circumstantial evidence, classified leaks, and investigative journalism has pieced together a compelling narrative. The project is believed to have been a joint operation between the United States and Israel, codenamed Operation Olympic Games. The program allegedly began under the George W. Bush administration and was accelerated under President Obama. For the United States, it represented a third option, a way to disrupt Iran's nuclear ambitions without resorting to a conventional military strike, which carried the risk of igniting a wider war in the Middle East. For Israel, which viewed a nuclear-armed Iran as an existential threat, it was a way to take direct action. The logic was sound. If you can't bomb the facility from the air, perhaps you can command the facility to bomb itself from within. According to extensive reporting by David E. Sanger of the New York Times, the program's roots can be traced to the Idaho National Laboratory, one of America's premier nuclear research centers. There, researchers began experimenting with the vulnerabilities of industrial control systems, demonstrating to intelligence officials that it was possible to digitally command centrifuges to self-destruct. This proof of concept evolved into a highly classified collaboration between the NSA and Israel's Elite Signals Intelligence Unit, Unit 8200. They allegedly built physical replicas of the Natanz centrifuge cascades in secret locations, including the Dimona nuclear complex in the Israeli desert, using them to test and refine the worm's code until the attack was perfected. They needed to ensure it would be destructive enough to be effective, but subtle enough to remain undiscovered for as long as possible. The program was so secret it was compartmentalized even within the intelligence communities, known only to a handful of individuals. Clues embedded within the code itself seem to point in this direction. One section of the code contained the number 19,790,509. At first, it seemed like a random date, but researchers realized May 9, 1979, was the date of the execution of Habib El-Ghanian, a prominent Jewish Iranian businessman, by the new Islamic Republic. It was seen by some as a possible calling card left by Israeli programmers. Another clue was a project file path found in the code that included the word myrtus. Myrtus is the Latin name for the myrtle plant. In Hebrew, the word for myrtle is Hadassah, which is the birth name of the biblical queen Esther, the Jewish queen who foiled a Persian plot to exterminate her people, a story of Israeli triumph over a Persian threat. These were not definitive proof, but they were tantalizing hints, digital fingerprints left at the scene of the crime. Stuxnet also contained a kill date, June 24, 2012, after which it would cease all activity, a feature designed to prevent the weapon from operating indefinitely. The definitive confirmation of a state-sponsored program would come years later through reporting based on interviews with officials inside the program and through documents leaked by NSA contractor Edward Snowden. These sources described Operation Olympic Games in detail, recounting how President Obama was regularly briefed on its progress and how he, presented with the risks and potential rewards, made the decision to repeatedly authorize its deployment. The initial vector for getting the worm across the Natanz air gap remains a subject of debate. It could have been a compromised contractor, an unwitting engineer carrying an infected USB drive, or even a deliberate act by a human agent on the inside. However it happened, it worked. The ghost crossed the digital moat and entered the castle. For a time, Operation Olympic Games was a stunning, covert success. By late 2010, international inspectors from the IAEA and Western intelligence agencies noted a significant and puzzling problem at Natanz. Nearly 1,000 centrifuges, out of about 9,000 then installed, were taken out of commission. The program, which had been steadily progressing, was suddenly set back by what experts estimated to be 18 months to 2 years. Iran's top officials were confused and furious. Ali Akbar Salehi, the head of Iran's Atomic Energy Organization, was forced to publicly admit to problems with the centrifuges, blaming them on technical issues. President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad acknowledged that his country's nuclear program had encountered problems created by electronic warfare, but he downplayed their severity. Internally, a witch hunt began for spies and saboteurs. The weapon had done its job perfectly. But weapons, especially new ones, have a tendency to be unpredictable. Stuxnet was designed to be a surgical tool, a sniper rifle aimed at a single, specific target. It was never meant to leave Natanz, but a programming error or an unforeseen circumstance, perhaps a more aggressive variant developed by the Israelis without full American consent, caused it to break containment. A laptop belonging to an engineer or a contractor at the facility, once connected to the internal network, became infected. When that laptop was later connected to the internet on the outside world, the worm began to spread. It followed its programming, replicating from machine to machine, from country to country. It was now in the wild. This is how Sergei Ulysin in Belarus came to find it. The worm that was designed for maximum stealth had inadvertently announced itself to the world. Once it was discovered, the global cybersecurity community descended upon it. Its secrets were laid bare, its zero-day exploits analyzed, and its stolen certificates revoked. Antivirus programs were quickly updated to detect and remove it. The weapon was effectively neutralized. But the damage was already done, and not just to Iran's centrifuges. The real damage was the precedent that had been set. Further analysis would reveal that Stuxnet was not alone. Researchers discovered 2 related pieces of malware, Duke and Flame. Duke, discovered in 2011, was a reconnaissance tool, designed not to sabotage, but to gather intelligence, like network diagrams and design documents, to prepare for a future attack. Flame, discovered in 2012, was a massive surveillance platform, a digital vacuum cleaner that could turn on a computer's microphone to record conversations, log keystrokes, and steal files. Together, this family of malware showed that Stuxnet was not a one-off attack, but part of a sustained multi-year cyber-espionage and sabotage campaign. The discovery of Stuxnet sent a shockwave through the worlds of geopolitics and technology. It was definitive proof that code could be used to cause direct physical destruction. A line had been crossed. The theoretical had become terrifyingly real. For years, experts had warned of a cyber Pearl Harbor, a scenario where hackers could shut down a nation's power grid, poison its water supply, or cause industrial accidents. Stuxnet demonstrated that this was no longer a hypothetical threat. The blueprints for how to do it were now public. The code itself, once dissected and understood, became a playbook for other nations. The United States and Israel had opened Pandora's box, and now other actors could learn from their methods. It triggered a global cyber arms race. Iran's response was predictable. While publicly downplaying the damage, they privately learned the lessons Stuxnet had taught them. They heavily invested in their own offensive cyber capabilities, creating a so-called Iranian cyber army. In the years that followed, major cyber attacks were attributed to Iran. In 2012, an attack using malware called Simoon hit Saudi Aramco, the Saudi national oil company, wiping the data from over 30,000 computers. The attack was not subtle. It was a digital sledgehammer, seemingly designed as a show of force. Later, American banks were hit with massive denial of service attacks, and the Sands Casino in Las Vegas was targeted, allegedly in retaliation for comments made by its owner, Sheldon Adelson. The creators of Stuxnet had wanted to avoid a conventional war, but in doing so, they had legitimized and accelerated a new kind of conflict, one with few rules of engagement and a constant risk of escalation. The legacy of Stuxnet is therefore deeply complex. On one hand, its proponents would argue that it was a success. It delayed a potential nuclear threat without a single shot being fired or a single life being lost, at least not directly. It was a clean, elegant, and effective alternative to a bombing campaign that would have killed thousands and destabilized an entire region. It was, in this view, a triumph of intelligence and restraint, a new tool for statecraft in the 21st century that may have helped create the space for the eventual Iran nuclear deal in 2015. But on the other hand, it represents a profound and dangerous turning point. By creating and deploying Stuxnet, the United States and Israel established a new norm in international conflict. They demonstrated a willingness to attack the critical civilian infrastructure of another sovereign nation. The air-gapped systems that run power plants, dams, chemical facilities, and transportation networks around the world were suddenly seen in a new light. They were no longer just infrastructure. They were potential targets. The very systems that underpin modern civilization were now part of the battlefield. Furthermore, the idea of a controllable, containable cyberweapon proved to be a dangerous illusion. The escape of Stuxnet into the wild showed that once a digital weapon is released, it is nearly impossible to control its proliferation. The code can be copied, repurposed, and deployed by anyone with the requisite skill. Other nations, terrorist groups, or even rogue individuals. The ghost, once summoned, cannot be easily put back in the bottle. It becomes a permanent part of the global threat landscape. The anatomy of Stuxnet, when fully dissected, reveals something more profound than just clever code. It is the anatomy of a paradigm shift. It is built from several key components. The first is its ambition. The leap from digital espionage to physical destruction. It wasn't content to steal secrets. It was designed to break things. The second is its precision. The layered multi-stage targeting system that allowed it to search a world of computers for one specific configuration of hardware, a digital needle in a global haystack. The third is its deception. The PL-level rootkit that turned an enemy's own diagnostic tools into instruments of psychological warfare, making the victim complicit in their own destruction. And finally, its attribution, the near-perfect anonymity of its creators, shielded by layers of code and plausible deniability, ushering in an era of conflict where the aggressor is often a shadow. Stuxnet was more than a piece of malware. It was a message. It was a demonstration of power, a shot across the bow in a new kind of great game played by nations. It proved that the digital and physical worlds were no longer separate domains. The bits and bytes flowing through silicon chips could be weaponized to manipulate atoms of steel and aluminum. The fallout from this single program continues to shape our world. influencing military doctrine, national security policy, and the way we think about the vulnerability of our hyper-connected society. The engineers at Natanz were hunting for a human saboteur, never imagining that the true enemy was a silent, invisible phantom made of pure logic and ghost that lived inside the machine. That ghost is now out, and it has shown us that the wars of the future may not begin with the sound of a bomb, but with the silence of a computer that has suddenly, inexplicably, stopped telling the truth. This has been Anatomy of Crime, where the truth is never simple, but always worth seeking.